In the previous video, we discussed that David Ricardo, he is a British political economist, come up with two channels through which international trade can promote economic growth and development. Okay, and we already discussed the first channel through which international trade helps extend the market across national borders so that labor can be further specialized or on the global market. Okay, and here in this video we're gonna talk about the second channel through which trade can promote economic growth and development. Okay, now this is actually David Ricardo's observation about one thing which happens over and over again in human history. Okay, that is like in the agricultural society. So we're talking about before the Industrial Revolution took place in Great Britain in 18th century, right? Before that, for thousands of years of the human history, the agricultural output did not really grow exponentially, okay, and the population did not grow exponentially. Oftentimes, we find that probably had or our ancestors can produce more in several years in a row, and then we find that the agricultural output declined. Okay, so it's always cyclical. It never had a real long-term sustainable or even exponential growth like we saw after Industrial Revolution. Okay. So here, let's talk about the traditional agricultural society first, and then we're gonna later talk about the industrialized economy. Okay. Now here, let's call this a suicide of economic growth of an agricultural society. In other words, the economic growth or the increase in agricultural output will kill itself. Okay, let's see how this took place step by step. So the first thing happened at the beginning is the unexpected economic growth. We said unexpected because there could be a random reason for this, like the climate change. Okay, I mean. For example, in a specific year, probably the rainfall, the temperature, and all other things from the mother nature, are all pretty good for the agricultural crops, okay, to grow. So the farmers find that their output are extremely good in that year. Okay, so. What's going to happen next is we're going to see a population growth, okay? Because when we have more food, especially the excess food, then our ancestors tended to make more babies, okay? Produce more people down the road, okay? Now, because of the increase in number of mouths to feed, as you could imagine that the price of food will go up, okay, because there's a higher demand, right, for food. And when the price of food rises, then the wage that the landlord paid to the farmers need to be raised to cover the increasing cost of the necessities. Okay? In other words, the farmers would ask, because the increase in the food prices, then they need to be paid more to cover their living expenses, okay, the rising living expenses. And because the wages are increased, the cost of production increases for the landlords. Okay, or you could say the capital owners, because landlords oftentimes are the owners of the agricultural tools, equipment, okay, as well. And so their profits fall. Okay? In other words, the increase in the wage outpaced the increase in the price or the revenue of landlords. Okay, and when the profit decreases, then we would find the saving of the capital owners, again, they're also landlords, decreases. Okay, and when they save less, then they invest less down the road. Okay, so the investment here, again, we're talking about the real investment, not financial investment. Okay, for example, this means the purchase of new agricultural tools, equipment, okay, would decrease, okay, or shrink, and then the capital stock of the whole agricultural society falls, okay, which will end the economic growth automatically. Okay, again, as we discussed before, according to Adam Smith, saving or the capital stock matters to economic growth. Okay, if a society cannot, keep adding more and more tools and equipments to its production, then it cannot grow sustainably. Okay. All right, and so this is, like the starting point here is the unexpected economic growth, and the ending point is that growth ends automatically. Okay, that's why we see kind of the cyclical things keep happening in our history. Okay, like some years the farmers produce a lot more, but after that they start declining, and then after a few years it has been picked up again. Right now, David Ricardo argued that if there's any way we can stop this the vicious circle, right, or this kind of the chain effect, right, like or stop the domino from falling, right, and he argued that these the increase in the cost of production is quite important. Okay, if we can stop the cost of production from increasing, then we would not see the other effects coming after that, right? So the saving would not decrease, investment would not shrink, and capital would probably stay the same or even more. Then the economic growth could continue. Okay. Now, how could we do that? Ricardo argues that we should do that through the international trade. Okay. In other words, we should import the agricultural products, especially the ones we're not so good at producing, from other economies, so that we can bring down the total cost of production. Okay, and of course, this should be quite easy for you guys to do the supply and demand analysis on the food market. So I would like to leave this for you guys to do it. Get a scratch paper and trying to draw the supply and demand and do that analysis. Okay, we can briefly discuss this during our class meeting. Okay. Now let's move on and talk about the economic slowdown of industrialized economy. Okay. Now, after the Industrial Revolution took place in Great Britain, we definitely see that our society can continue to grow. Okay, and especially for some economies during some period of time in history, they could experience the exponential growth. In other words, very faster growth in a continuous period of time. Okay, but before that, let's still talk about the economic slowdown. In other words, we're saying that without international trade, we could say the same thing we discussed before with the agricultural society. Okay. Now, how so? Here, you'll probably remember a very, very important economic principle, which is called law of diminishing returns, okay, LDR, or sometimes we call it diminishing returns to an input. Okay. Now, David Ricardo argues that as you apply more of a variable input to a fixed input, the productivity of the variable input would eventually decline as long as technology is fixed. Okay. Now, let me give you a quick example about automaking. Okay. Suppose that you have only one assembly line in your auto factory. Okay. And when you start hiring the first group of workers, okay, like the first group of 10 or 20, you would find that they are the most productive ones, because in your workplace there are plenty of space for them. They can choose wherever they want to stand, wherever they find most comfortable producing, okay, or assemble the parts. Now, when you start adding more and more workers, auto workers into your workplace, your factory, okay, like 10 groups, 20 groups, when you have, let's say, more than 1,000 workers working along your assembly line, you would probably find, it's just too crowded for them to work, right? Like everybody, whenever everybody moves, and it's always getting each other's way, right? So that's how the productivity of labor declined. Okay, and that's why we said here, if you do not increase your the number of assembly lines, then we're gonna see the variable inputs productivity, which is labor here, would decline. Okay, so again, in this case, the assembly line or capital would be the fixed input, and labor would be the variable input. Okay, now we can easily put the LDR on the graph. Okay, so here, as you can see that we show you the quantity of labor and the quantity of weight, in the agricultural sector, how much they can produce. Okay, and for example, the first unit of labor produces 19 units bushels of weight, and the first 2 units of labor together produce 36 bushels of weight. So by taking the difference, you would be able to find the marginal product of labor, which is MPL. Okay, delta Q, which is a change in output divided by change in labor. You can find that. Okay, now when we put the total quantity of weight produced and the amount of labor used on the graph, you can basically find that the TP, total product curve, gets flatter and flatter when they hire more workers and produce more weight. Okay. In other words, that means by adding one more unit of labor into the production, the last unit just added becomes less productive. Okay. Now you will be able to find another numerical example on the worksheet number 4. You can do that. Okay. Now, once again, David Ricardo argues that international trade helps reduce the prices of food and other necessities through their import from the trading partners. Okay, as we argued, because the food are more expensive when we have more people, how about to just buy it, from the other economies which can, produce it at a lower cost. Okay, and so eventually this will help raise the savings in the capital stock of the society, so the economy can continue to grow.